Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show Crosstalk. Well, right now, meetings are taking place in London of the G7. The G7 always seem to be having meetings. I mean, any time of week or month they're having a meeting, because this is a meeting of the G7 foreign ministers in preparation for the G7 leaders meeting next month in Cornwall, which is very, very nice. The G7 always look after themselves. Because right now the UK is head of the G7, and so therefore everything is happening in the UK. And so few things, Peter, I think are quite as nauseating as the smarmy self-congratulation that the G7 leaders engage in whenever they get together. Just for a little flavor of this, let's take a look at the press conference that was held by Dominic Raab, the UK Foreign Secretary, and the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And here we have Raab speaking. So today, Tony and I discussed a full range of issues. Notice the Tony, my good friend Tony. I'll give you a highlight, I think, of some of the key points. We talked about our shared commitment to stand up for open societies, democracy, human rights, protecting fundamental freedoms, tackling disinformation, holding human rights abuses to account. We talked about the need to reinforce the multilateral system, and then went on about these other things. And best of all, let me just find this. When he says here that, as for the G7, at its core, it is a partnership based on values. Incidentally, I should say that during this presser, the word values came up 12 times, as did the term climate change. So that's you see where they're pregnant. So it says at its core, it's a partnership based on values, and so it's fitting that today we meet on World Press Freedom Day. And we've seen a whole range of attacks on journalists from Belarus to Myanmar.
This is the same country where Julian Assange is being held.
Yes. A few miles away, locked up, supermax prison, been convicted of nothing for 2 years. He's in prison with the worst people in the world. Child rapists, serial killers, the worst. He's sharing digs with them. And incidentally, why is he doing this? Because Tony and the government that Tony represents wants him extradited and wants to send him to prison for 175 years. So it says violations of media freedoms are growing around the world at what I feel is an alarming rate. And I welcome the unequivocal stance of the United States and the hold of the G7 on safeguarding those vital democratic bulwarks in our media freedoms. So that gives you a sense of the...
Well, and just so I don't forget, this is the same kind of people that cheered when the government of Ukraine shut down media outlets that they didn't feel that towed their ideological and foreign policy views. So the end of you can't have freedom of speech if you disagree with me now, can you?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's an excellent point. Because Ukraine, and of course the fawning media that are in attendance, never occurs to them to ask such a question, whether about Assange or about, as you say, Ukraine. They were closing them down, alleging that they were tied to Russia. No evidence at all that they're in any way tied to Russia. They're tied to the opposition.
The people that cover these things are media eunuchs. Okay, that's what they all are. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay, they wait for the press release and then they just rewrite it slightly because they're not very smart, and then they release it as their own copy. Okay,
and in the same thing, during the presser, Dominic Raab and this is something we should talk about, how the UK has now become the sort of the attack dog of the Western world. It's basically just foaming at the mouth. You have to put a muzzle on the UK now. Rob, of course, brought up Navalny. Well, what do you say? Navalny. Now, the case against Navalny is a hell of a lot stronger than against Julian Assange. In the first place, Navalny is a Russian citizen, and therefore the Russian courts have jurisdiction over Navalny. He was also tried in a proper court of law, convicted, sentenced. None of that applies to Julian Assange. He's not a citizen of the UK.
He was paroled after a certain part of his sentence. He broke his
violated
parole.
the terms of his parole. So we have this powwow, this completely meaningless powwow ahead of their lovely little get together in Cornwall. I don't know about you, Peter. I wouldn't mind a little trip to Cornwall. But very, very pretty.
Sign me up. Okay.
And then after this meeting, Secretary of State Tony will be flying to Ukraine to show Kiev that the United States stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. It's interesting that's his one country.
And shoulder to shoulder, shutting down media outlets you don't like.
That's it. Yeah. Not going anywhere else. Not going to Germany. Not going to Greece. Not going to anywhere else. Ukraine.
I'm so glad we're doing this, because when you told me, said, let's do G7, and I'm so glad Russia isn't in G8. Okay.
Right.
Okay. And people have actually said, do you think the Russians miss it? And I said, well, I don't. Okay. Because the G7, let's go back to origins, everyone. Remember the Club of Rome? Remember the stagflation of the 1970s? And it was it was founded on economics, not values. Remember population over, remember all this stuff they were fed us in the 1970s, doom and gloom, okay?
Right. No, it was originally the G5 at the time of the following the oil shock and as you said, the stagflation of the 1970s. So there was only 5 countries that would get together. Then it got to 7, and then Bill Clinton, in return for Yeltsin basically just falling down on his knees before Russia, throw this lifeline. But the Russians knew from the start that it was just a matter of time before they would be kicked out. I mean, it was like they were only invited in order to be kicked out at the appropriate moment.
And good riddance, okay? But you know what Tony wants, the leadership meeting to be about, with their fancy food and wine, is that we have to use our values against China, and that's going to be the thrust of the G7 this year. And again, this is just a fool's errand. Of course, there are going to be countries. It's been being reported that the investment deal that China had made with the European Union may be in doubt because of human rights. Mark my words, George, they're going to go through with it. They will go through with it, okay, at the end of the day, because Europe has to decide if it's going to be a geopolitical player or not. And if it doesn't want to, it will go into oblivion. It will be irrelevant, stagnant, and no one will really care. Okay, they have to make a huge historical decision right now. They've built this thing. You better start using it. Okay, if you don't, it's going to fall apart. But again, if we go to the origins of the G5, G7, G8, G7, it wasn't designed to do what Tony Blinken wants it to do, because the countries that are in the G7, it's not a function of values, as much as they tell you over and over and over again, because and plus, if you have the satellite, they always do this, they have the kids table at the G7. And what are they doing? They're inviting a number of Asian countries. I think South Africa is going to be there, and they want to get them on board for their, values, but all of the G7 countries don't practice the values that they want everyone else to.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's why it is just so outrageous that they should talk about press freedom. I mean, what country in the world it treats, a journalist, a famous, award-winning, distinguished journalist in this way? You lock him up with, Russia would never did this. Russia wouldn't lock up political prisoners with murderers, cutthroats, child rapists, serial killers. They would never do that. I mean, it would always, you keep them separate. And for the fact that they've done this, and Assange has not been convicted of anything, and this is how they treat him. And they have the nerve, they actually have the insolence to talk, well, we care about values, we care about, well, press freedom. Not here, of course, but in Belarus. That's what we care about, press freedom.
No, these things are, they're just simply an embarrassment, okay? Because if you look at a lot of the problems that the world is dealing with, it is basically came from the G7 countries through the form of neo-colonialism around the world. I mean, I call it a postmodern Orientalism, okay? I mean, this is woke Orientalism, which doesn't go any, I mean, first of all, most people in the West don't like it, and it's getting on their nerves. Most of the world could care less because they have no idea what they're talking about. So the G7 will talk to itself, okay, at the taxpayers' expense, and it will mean nothing. It's Tony Blinken going around the world trying to impress people that are not very impressed, okay? Because at the end of the day, are these countries going to work in unison under Tony Blinken and start a containment policy of China? No. And let's be clear, everyone. The cost of the British sending 2 frigates, to Taiwan Strait. The French send 1. Okay. The Germans apparently have a ship that they can send over there too. I mean, but that doesn't really mean anything at all. Okay. It's saber rattling. It's beating your chest.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's not policy.
And what is now becoming clear is that both Russia and China are now hitting back with sanctions, and hitting them hard, because these sanctions that they hit, these aren't pinprick sanctions. These are sanctions that are designed to hurt. I mean, when the British imposed sanctions on China, China retaliated by throwing out particularly British lawyers. Now, UK lawyers are like fat cat lawyers anyway, they make a ton of money in China. And if suddenly they can't do work in China, then they start really hurting. And then they start complaining bitterly, hey, we've lost our business. We were living high on the hog in London, and now we've lost our business in China. So both the Russians and the Chinese are now absolutely very carefully targeting to make sure that they hurt. We're going to hurt those people who think that they get easy money here in China or in Russia or whatever.
I really have to look up the reference because I keep talking about it, how a Bloomberg report helping the Russians get an off-ramp in Ukraine. Right. This was back in 2014. The Chinese are saying the same thing to Washington and London. We can help you get off, okay? But you have to realize you're dealing with peers. You're not dealing with Honduras. You're not dealing with Panama. You're dealing with us. Right. And if you want to throw a punch, you throw it first. We'll throw it back. Okay. And they don't understand the lack of leverage, their vulnerability, because if you look at a lot of these Western businesses in the UK and the US, they may talk the talk, made in America, helping the American worker and all that. There's no evidence, even under Trump, that they did any of those things. Okay. They are extremely vulnerable. Right. And the difference is with these policymakers never seem to understand China has a vast, huge internal market. It can continue its development internally, okay? They got a lot of work to do still, okay? I mean, everyone, China's at our mercy with international trade. No, it's not true. It's not true. As a matter of fact, what they want is they want commodities, food, fruit, and stuff like that. Your junk, your TVs, they don't want them, okay? Your own citizens don't want them.
And it's now getting quite very, very serious from the U.S. perspective, because now the China is moving away and moving global trade away from using the dollar as a reserve currency. They've got now their digital yuan. Russia is moving away from the SWIFT financial information system. They're now developing trading systems, which will be all done in national currencies, not reliant upon the dollar. So suddenly, this great leverage that the West seems to think that it has, it doesn't do it. And now Russia and China are basically saying, we will not tolerate the West throwing its weight around and imposing sanctions here, there, and everywhere. And so smaller countries that can't defend themselves, like Venezuela or Iran, will now have an alternative system they can go to. Then it's something they're not going to be on their knees because they're cut off from the dollar.
Well, one of the things, and this is part of the mix here, let's think about it logically. The world is awash with dollars and cheapened dollars, devalued dollars, because so many of them in circulation right now. And it's at a certain point, it could happen slowly. There could be a breaking point and we'll see a moment of inflection. But George, when people are not using those dollars, where are those dollars going to go? They're going to go swiftly back to the United States. Then what do you get? Hyperinflation. Okay, so they're playing with fun. See, they play with the currency as a weapon, and it is weaponized, and it will come and strike you in the throat. Right. It will be very painful.
No, I think that's exactly right. And now this is happening on a regular basis, and it's clear from everything that the Russian officialdom says. I mean, Lavrov gave a very long interview the other day to Kiselev, who's a big media figure in Russia, in which he basically is outlining it that we are developing a system that will prevent the West from throwing its weight around and thinking that it can just simply organize itself as a system of states to isolate Russia and to encircle China. It's not going to work. We know this is your plan. We're ready, and we will not tolerate it. And but this goes back also now to the question of the UK. Now, UK seems to be suffering some major identity crises, which it's a kind of a permanent condition with the UK. Like famously Dean Acheson said, Britain lost an empire, but has yet to find a role. But Britain always seems to have difficulties finding a role. So now that it's out of the EU, it seems to have become, more savage in its cold warriorship than the cold warrior in chief in the United States. So during the presser yesterday between Rob and Tony, Tony was sounding quite moderate. We don't want to escalate with Russia. Our people are, we're trying to work out a summit meeting and so on. Whereas Rob was just simply ranting and raving about, Navalny, chemical weapons, cyber attacks. We've got to do something about Russia. It's kind of this bizarre phenomenon. Well, the mouse that roared. It's like
exactly. See, I experience this every single day in my own personal life. See, I have 2 dachshunds, and I put them on leads. But I have a Chihuahua, which usually is sitting on me, but not right now. His name is Buddy. But I don't put him on a lead. And so when we go for a walk, he creates a perimeter and he barks at everybody, everything, every dog, every car, every blade of grass. And that's how Rob seems to me. He just is out there barking at anything, okay, real or imagined, okay? And he looks foolish, okay, looking for a role. Right. And the only real role they have, I mean, is of course, Tony, he's going to give lip service to his, his colleague and friend and all that. But, the special relationship isn't worth squat. I'm sorry, you guys. We talk about it all the time, but it isn't worth anything. I mean, Tony Blair, he threw in his lot with the illegal war with Iraq because he didn't want to be on the wrong side of policy with the United States. That was the only, not any moral issue, okay? Not any moral issue. Not any strategic issue.
No. The way it works, the British, they follow the Americans, but the Americans like the fact that the British add a little bit of class to the operation. So, you bring on Tony Blair, and he just sounds so much better than George W. Bush. And so, let's have him as the front man for the Iraq invasion, because it sounds so better when it comes from an Englishman. Same thing happened in 99 in the bombing of Yugoslavia. Again, it was either Bill Clinton or Tony Blair. Again, no one wants to listen to Bill Clinton, who sounds like a secondhand car salesman. Kind of he was, but Blair, that's great. Oh, that's a real, now we have a really class act.
Yeah, because he's a professional con man. Okay?
Exactly, a professional con man, but it just sounds so much better from an Englishman.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe it only here at the Gaggle, you heard people talking about the G7, and it's rightfully so, because, you know, it's unimportant, and George and I just explained to you why it's unimportant. But the the eunuchs will be out there writing its praises. You can mark my word, and it's no coincidence. And this is going to be a nice tag team for George and I probably tomorrow. Let's take a look at what Tony's up to in Ukraine. A lot of things are going on around Ukraine right now. We'll try to, I think, if nothing else comes up, I think that's what we'll.
I think that's a good idea. But itself is very interesting, because he's going to Kiev. What's he going to say? Because he can't very well keep telling him, hey, keep what you're doing, because it's already clear. No one's coming to Ukraine's rescue.
Okay, my dog ate my homework, but I'm working on a new one. Don't worry. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but see, this is the negative returns. I mean, I've been explaining this to people here all the time, is that you can't keep this level of tension, then people start laughing at you.
Right.
Okay. And I think we're at the laugh test already. Right. I mean, you got to do something. God forbid you give the green light. And you and I have talked about the scenarios that maybe we can reiterate and update it tomorrow. But Tony, your words are cheap. Okay.
Right. But that's the thing, and this is another point that Lavrov made during his interviews, that you're getting countries like the Czech Republic and Ukraine who are kind of being egged on, and then lo and behold, they suddenly find themselves they're on their own in Russia. Well, hey, I thought you had our back. Well, next week perhaps. Got a lunch meeting to get to.
Yeah, that's the cost of being a junior member in a club. Okay, you pay your dues, but nobody cares what you think about the club. You just pay your dues. Okay, that's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. All right, Peter. We will of course maintain our laser-like focus on the G7, and we have a very big announcement. We shortly at the Gaggle will be on locals. So the point of locals, it's a community, and we will be able to interact with our audience. And please subscribe to whatever amount that you're.
And we'll start mentioning it in the description to
exactly, and then
where we are, how to get there. And what George said is really, really important, is that George and I have made a commitment to interact with our audience. So if you want to talk to us, ask us a question, this is an ideal format to do it. George and I have made a commitment to dedicate some time to it. So we'd like to get to know you. You've been getting to get to know us.
Exactly. We're trying to build a community of like-minded people, exchange of thoughts, ideas, news sites, everything. So for the subscription, I think it's going to be a great deal, and I'm really looking forward to it. And Peter, you are as well. So with that said, look us up on Rumble. We're on Rumble, and if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.